Welcome to another episode of the SparkCom podcast. How are you doing today, Adam?
I'm doing great, Manny. It's always good to see your face.
Thanks very much. We've had a couple of good episodes discussing the idea of a pivot, both from a value and sort of the right way to do it, and a capabilities, which is kind of the wrong way to do it. I want to take the lens here and move it over a bit and discuss the component of a business when you're stuck in the swamp, when you feel like you can't move. And I want to go back to a company we discussed last week, which was Disney. Disney happens to be a conversation we have at our household often, as I've got 4 kids that are basically 7 to 14, and Marvel, Lucasfilm, all that stuff is central to our conversation. But I want to go in and talk about what's happening today with respect to Disney and get your thoughts on that, Adam.
Sure. As we end this first week of August in 2020, there's a lot of discussion about what's going on in the stock market and is it overpriced. People like Jim Cramer are saying that it's crazy. I think it's important that we get away from talking about generalizations and get very specific about companies. There are companies that are doing really well right now, like Facebook, like Apple, like Amazon. But the question is, it doesn't really apply to everyone. And one company that came out with earnings this last week was Disney. And when they announced their earnings, they announced that revenues were off some 50%, profits were non-existent, things were horrible. And the question was, how do you interpret that in the middle of a pandemic? As I've said before, 2 consecutive quarters of declining revenues or profits puts you into a growth stall, which is very, very problematic to get out of. And here we have Disney showing all the signs of heading into the growth stall. So should the stock crater? Should the stock go up? What should happen? And I think what we can do is take a look at where the company's been, and then we can start to get a pretty good handle on where the company is likely to go. All right. So Walt Disney founded this company so many years ago on the idea of make-believe. He wanted to take movies and make them something that you could enter and live in the world of make-believe. The movies at the time were all done by actors, and they had fictional plots. That wasn't make-believe. He really introduced the animation to the movies. We didn't really have animated movies prior to that. And they really worked on how to make animation very believable, make it very real. And across the years, Disney's got extraordinarily good at that. So animation was their big innovation. That animation in movies allowed them to put people into the world of make-believe. Great, company does well, makes a lot of money. They do well on the movies. They eventually have Walt Disney's Wide World, and so they were able to, the Colorful World of Disney, and so they were able to take it to television. That's great. So what happens with the company? We see they start to get into this mode of extending that one thing, extending the idea of make-believe. So we see what? Walt Disney opens up a theme park in Los Angeles, and the idea is come to the theme park and live for a few hours in the world of make-believe. And then he extends that over and he opens one in Orlando, and then eventually they open one in Hong Kong and Japan and near Paris, and they open multiple theme parks. The idea being the same idea they had in the 1950s when Walt Disney founded the company, help people live in a world of make-believe. As they get the theme parks going, the second thing they do is they say, hey, we have all these wonderful characters, and everybody seems to be able to identify with these characters. So in the 80s, they launched Disney Retail. And that's basically take these characters, come up, make games, make stuffed animals, make anything you can think of, dishes, playware, everything that builds upon these characters that we have in the world of make-believe, right? Winnie the Pooh, etc. Again, what we see is we're not really any new ideas in there. There's no innovation in that. Theme parks weren't innovative theme parks. They were the standard theme parks. And they were all building on this one concept of make-believe. So the world goes along, and what we start seeing is there's not a lot of attention being paid to what's happening out in the world. Like, for example, animation starts to really flourish and becomes much bigger. But it doesn't become bigger in the way of Disney with their make-believe and their Alice in Wonderland. It often goes into a much different kind of a world, right? Where the Asian anime, a lot of times a lot of violence, there's a gang warfare, people killing each other, beheadings, all kinds of stuff. So as people are watching animation, the animation market's growing, but the part that's growing is not the make-believe part, the sort of part that Disney lived in, right? They're not paying much attention to that. Simultaneously, people are thinking about cartoons. Well, the growth in cartoons isn't the old-fashioned Archie comics. We have the death of Charlie Brown. All that sort of characters now becomes smaller and smaller relative to bringing out the sort of Marvel Avengers type comics.
Well, then it goes to show why Disney bought both Pixar to alleviate its ailing, an aging animation studio, and then subsequently bought Marvel to, like you said, get that Avengers idea put forward.
Except what we don't see is that they've actually embraced that as a change in the company, right? They don't really, you see them, it's making movies, but what I'm trying to get at is more the trend. So the trend through the 50s, 60s, 70s, as the boomer generation of today was coming up, was to live in that world of make-believe. And what we really have today is a world in which the boomers love Disney a lot more than their grandkids do.
Yeah.
If you look at where the grandkids are and where they're living on Instagram, TikTok, they're in short form stuff. They're looking at more real stuff. They're going out and looking at little things that people are making and putting up on YouTube. So they're not as mesmerized by these cartoonish make-believe worlds that Disney has created. It's really, you see more, if you go look at the theme parks prior to the pandemic, you saw more grandparents dragging their grandkids through the theme park than you would hear of kids yelling and screaming at their grandparents to fly them to Orlando to the theme park. And that's what's happening is the company keeps defending and moving down the road of the original idea, its original core, and just keeps extending it. So that's really what we've seen happening. And so now what I would say is I would be extraordinarily concerned because theme parks aren't the business they used to be. If you're familiar with the Six Flags Corporation, it teetered on the edge of bankruptcy for several years before it finally filed. And it's barely been able to try to survive with the theme parks they have. The theme park business is not a good business. It's not a profitable business. Disney's been kind of hiding that, not talking about it so much, right? But it keeps trying to think it's going to make this continue to go forward. But the pandemic is hitting that so hard because it's not the world of make-believe if you walk in and these characters, Mickey Mouse has got a mask on. It's not the world of make-believe if you can't hug the characters, Winnie the Pooh, et cetera, and instead you have to stay 6 feet away from them. Now that make-believe has gone away. It's very, very real. Now we're in the real world. Oh, yes, you're not an artificial character. I'm not in an artificial world when I'm at Disneyland. I'm actually in the very real world, and these are artificial characters. Yeah. And it strips away that veneer. It strips away that underlying original theme that the organization had. And what we really start seeing is that the theme parks are really much more of an albatross than something great. Same's kind of true for the retail business, right? The retail stores and all those characters. Yeah. We're out there trying to push those characters when in fact they need to be pushing far different world. And the last piece of this is back to the movies. What's happened to movies in the last 20 years? Well, we're seeing people just don't go to theaters anymore, right? We've had this dramatic shift where people don't go to the theaters to watch big budget movies. The few times I've been to a movie in the last 5 years, I have to admit, I go into a theater with 200 seats and I feel like I'm in there with 15 people. And I'm going to see new releases. That's the only time I go to see one. I haven't been in a packed theater in a couple of decades, I don't think. It's been a very long time. So this ability to make very high budget, $200, $300 million movies, and then launch them into the theaters and try to go win awards is really something of the past, right? We're now in a Netflix world. We're now in a world where people are making movies. They have the technology. The digital technology that Pixar created is available to everyone, right? So we can lots of people can make the kinds of movies that Disney did, but people can make them much more modern and much more style. And Disney missed that. They were continuing to go that direction. Only in the last few months have they finally launched a streaming service, right? They never could figure out how to do streaming, right? Why didn't they get into this whole streaming business 5 years ago when it was fairly obviously an important issue? Is more and more people signing up for Netflix, more and more people watching movies at home, watching Hulu, et cetera. That was clearly happening, but Disney waited and waited and waited, didn't get into the business. Now, finally, they've got their streaming. They call it Disney Plus. And now what? The big thing, they want you to watch Mulan. We're going to release Mulan, $280 million production. The only way we can get our movie back on that is after you pay for your subscription, Manny, you're going to pay $30 to watch Mulan in your house. Now, will that work? It'll work for a while, maybe. But we all are kind of addicted to the free internet, right? we don't like paying extra once we do something on the internet. We go look at a newspaper, they start trying to charge us to look at articles. We have a tendency to find another newspaper, we have a tendency to move on. So it's quite clear, if you look at what they've done, is they've kept investing, consistently investing, and extending the original concept, the original core of the business, this world of make-believe. Our value proposition is we deliver make-believe. That's been their value proposition. But they've let the tools get very old, get very dated. Cinematic movie theaters, theme parks, and retail stores have gotten very, very dated.
So let me make a couple points here. There's a big difference between creative and innovative. I've talked to some people and we've discussed innovation, and what they really meant was creative. There's no doubt that Disney's creative. You go see all these theme parks, there's stuff that's cool and creative, but it's not innovative. You're absolutely right. So if we were to march in to the board of directors of Disney tomorrow, if we would meet there in Burbank, you and I march in that door and talk to them about what they can do right now. We've talked about how smaller companies and startups actually have an advantage in being able to be more nimble. Now we're talking about a 70 some odd billion dollar company like Disney shifting around. Now they do have a lot of gravitas. They do have lots and lots of cash, right? What would we tell them, Adam?
Well, the first thing I want to do is look at the leadership team. For many years, Disney's been run by a man named Bob Iger. But in the last year, Bob Iger finally decided to become executive chairman and be replaced with a new CEO. His name is Bob Chapek, okay? The problem with that is look at his background. Bob, first thing he did was he was in movie distribution.
Bob, the second Bob.
New CEO, the current CEO, guy's been in the job less than a year, right? How did he get his chops? Movie distribution. Well, that's a dying part of the business. Then what did he do? He cleaned up, quote unquote, the retail stores. We know what's happening with retail stores, right? We've talked about retail, where that's headed. And then the products, the consumer goods that they've been selling exclusively, primarily through retail. That was the second thing he did. That's a dying business. Then the last thing he did was he ran the theme park business. That was his last experience. And this is the person you just installed. What the company has in another guy named Mayer, M-A-Y-E-R is his last name, was a fellow who ran direct to consumer. And what we see as board of directors do is make the classic mistake that a lot of leadership teams do. They went to replace the CEO who had been very successful, Bob Iger, with someone who had a background like him, someone who knew the business, someone who'd come up through all the things that made the company originally great. He knows the business. What you want to do is not have that person.
Do I hear defend and extend? Is that what I'm hearing?
Right, exactly. That's what he's going to do. It's easy to predict. What they need the person with the eyes that are outbound, the person that says, oh, how do I go out to the new world? How do I update all this stuff about Disney? How do I get us into the next century?
Yeah, and this is the part that scares people. I'm looking at my computer screen here, and revenue of the Walt Disney Company in 2019. 25 billion was media networks, ESPN, ABC, stuff like that. 25 billion. 26 billion were parks, experiences, and products. Okay. 11 billion was studio entertainment, and 9 billion was direct to consumer and international. So right. Conventional theory is, hey, you got two big eggs here, a smaller egg and a little baby quail egg. Why would I nurture the baby quail egg instead of nurturing the big ostrich eggs, right? Conventional wisdom. But what you're saying here is we got to really retool the whole thing.
Mighty oaks from tiny acorns grow, right? I want to back off of your analogy of eggs and go to that one instead.
Okay.
I hear this a lot. I got to protect the mothership. We got to take care of the mothership. We got to defend the mothership. That kind of language that comes out of executives. And my point is that's exactly how you get yourself in trouble. That's when I know you're stuck. The smartest thing they could do, like I said, replace the CEO, because the first thing I'd do is I would take all those theme parks, I would put some kind of a label on it, and I would spin it out. I would take it off to the market. I would either get a private equity firm to buy those things or put it off into the stock market all in its own right as a separate theme park company. One, if theme parks are going to be something in the future, now they're moved away from the Disney requirements that they have. They can figure out what it takes to get people in. Probably got to have experiences that are near suicidal to try to get teenagers happy these days, but you figure it out, and either A, theme parks are going to survive, and you're going to figure out how to get out of those dumb old kinds of theme park toy rides and get into the new ones, or if you're going to start shutting it down. Whichever case, Disney needs to get out of it. They need to get away from it. It's just an albatross. All those assets, huge assets, are an albatross hanging around their neck. Second thing you got to be aware, movie theaters are on the way out. We've been closing movie theaters for 10 years. We're going to close a lot more of them really fast now that the pandemic has hit, right? I live in Vegas, as you know. We don't need 120 movie theaters in Las Vegas. It's way more. Most people have theater rooms in their houses. They can go watch in their media rooms and have an experience that they like. Yeah, we need a few theaters. There are times you want to go to see something in a theater, perhaps a movie, perhaps a live play, perhaps a corporate production of something. Somebody's having their annual meeting of employees and you want a theater for that. So there's a need for that sort of real estate, but nowhere near the amount of it we have now. So you want to sit back and say, the people that have been focused on how we're going to release movies into theaters, we don't need that either, right? It's like Netflix waking up saying the future is going to be streaming. Why do I need all these people that know how to do logistics? I don't need all these people that know the Postal Service, FedEx, et cetera. That's the past. We need to transition them out so we can transition the new. And then I would take all those resources I've just created. I've just freed up all that, turned it into cash, and put that in the direct-to-consumer. Now we can start thinking about what could we do at Disney in terms of giving you a virtual reality experience? What could I do to make my movies more interactive, or getting into video gaming? Somehow there's gaming related to this, or gaming that are interactive with the movie, so you're inside the movie playing a game. How could I partner with a Google or with at this time Facebook or Google or Apple that are in the VR world pretty seriously? How could I get with them enough to figure out how I could be on the content side of helping make the VR experiences really, really good, right? And then start saying, well, what should I do in terms of a streaming environment? Should I just make movies and downstream? Gee, it seems like I'm chasing Netflix if I do that. Maybe I should take my streaming environment and make it something else. Maybe it should be more about gaming. We should have an adult version of this that has real casino type gaming with real money involved. I need layers of this. It'll go down to children. So, but that's the direct to consumer route, and that's the future. Look at what we got. Retail is dying. We're all buying from Amazon, and if you don't want to give Amazon a cut, you got to build your own website, get it on Shopify, or get it on Etsy, and get out there and sell stuff. Direct to consumer. Have your brand. Know your brand. Direct to consumer. Middlemen don't belong. We've been killing off travel agents, killing off insurance agents. We've been killing off middlemen ever since the internet was created. That is the old, and what we see is, as you said, these are big revenue chunks, but they're old, they're dated, they're going away, they're going to have a slow death. And if you don't get rid of them now, you'll be like Blockbuster. Had all those stores, didn't do them any good, right?
I think the killer here is romance. Romance, right? Those theme parks are romantic. They're beautiful. This is Walt's dream, right? This is, right? And I see a lot of small businesses struggling with that. It's a family-owned restaurant, a family-owned manufacturing facility, and they're stuck in a very specific market, and they feel as though they can't move away from it because Grandpa started the company. Well, guess what? Grandpa's gone, and now it's your turn to run the company, and it's your responsibility to yourself to make the right decision to keep it alive. But do you really think that Disney and the board would ever sell off the romantic theme parks, for instance?
I see it. This makes all the sense in the world. Why would you keep it? It's like a university with all those buildings, right? If you know the growth of the university is going to happen online, that's where the growth is. So you start saying, how do I reduce my footprint in the part of the business that's shrinking in order to increase my footprint in the part of business that's growing? So I need to sit there and balance those things out. I need Avengers-like experiences. That's what young people are wanting. They want to get out and somehow have that. Well, if I'm going to pretend like I'm a superhero, VR is the only way I'm going to make that happen, right? It's not going to be, I can't be a superhero on a ride in an amusement park. It just doesn't work. So the physical world doesn't let you do that because those characters aren't from the physical world, right? They're from another world. for what, this is again, there's a romance, as you said, but this is the family business. This is the history of the company. Walt Disney did something pretty miraculous. He was very innovative, brought new technology to the screen, brought new characters to the screen. There were certain elements of storytelling he brought to the screen. The company figured out how to take that and extend its reach into some other businesses. But that's all long in the tooth now. Now you need a leader who can come in and say, well, what is the future? What's going to excite people that are between the ages of 6 and 26? How do I get them wanting to do something as a family, right? I mean, we hear it all the time. People say, yeah, I took my daughter and we went to watch a movie and she sat there with her phone on through the whole movie, or she sat there with her phone on through, the whole time we were at the amusement park, she couldn't seem to leave her phone alone. Clearly what's happening is you're not recognizing that her needs are not being met.
Yeah.
And so we got to have somebody who could come in and start to recognize that, identify with that. Now, I'm impressed, like here in Las Vegas, they took one of the casinos called the Luxor. It's built like a pyramid. It's kind of famous for that pyramid shape. And they turned it into an e-gaming establishment. When you go there, they have, you pay to go watch people play electronic games. You can sit in the audience and watch them play these games. And they sell it out. Young people come in droves. The number one fastest growing sport in the world by leaps and bounds is e-gaming, electronic gaming. The highest paid sports athletes in the world are gamers. It's not
believe me, my 14-year-old son reminds me of that every chance he gets.
Right.
He actually watches these things on YouTube of other people playing games, and they know their names. They follow them like sports guys, right? They follow them like sports players.
Yeah. Now, you don't have traditional sports people doing that. You don't see it on ESPN, right? They're not going to do it for 15 minutes on the evening news. That's a huge opportunity. That's where Disney should be thinking. How do we get into that? How do we leverage that? If Microsoft's got the games and Sony's got the games and Nintendo's got the games, how do we do something with them where we take that and we put that into content? We recycle that content in a way that really engages people. And they really want it. They want to be part of that. I don't have that answer right now, but you would think with all the good people they have and the strength they have and the talent they have, you put those people to that challenge for 2-3 years, and I can sort of imagine some of the output of it, some of the virtual reality type things you could get out of it, some of the at-home interactive kinds of two-way things you could do, or while you're watching something on the screen, you could interact with something through your computer so that you're making a difference. Like you could change the plot, or you could make decisions about who's going to be involved in a battle between superheroes, things like that. There are a lot of things I could see how it could emerge. But it won't happen with this CEO, and it won't happen as long as you're trying to defend those theme parks, trying to keep the movie theaters stuffed with content as they are both dying. That's not going to get you there. So this is where we start saying you got to recognize where you're stuck before you're able to get in a position to where you're going to succeed, right? Otherwise, if I could go in, we could give us pitch and say, oh, Kyle Adams all excited, and he tells us what the future is going to be. But the board won't do something until it realizes it's stuck. When you picked that CEO, you were stuck. You said, well, we want somebody that runs the old business. And what I'm saying to them now is you got to get rid of at least part of that business, get the resources, and put all that into something new. And then make sure you have the right person leading the organization that can run that new thing to get you out there in an innovative way to solving unmet needs.
Well, at this moment, for a little tiny bit more time, maybe a month and a half, maybe 2 months, they still have the opportunity to gracefully make these decisions, right? Mm-hmm. In 2-3 months, the market will make the decision for them, and it may be a bloodbath, right? It may be something that they're going to shutter these amusement parks down, and it's going to get ugly, and it's going to really, at the end of the day, taint the legacy that Walt Disney started. He was innovative in his own right. He did things, like we mentioned at the start of this, that were unheard of at the time. And if he was alive today, I think he'd be among the first to say, you know what, we're going to save this forest, to use your analogy here, and we're going to chop down this big tree, which is the amusement parks, to make it happen.
Right. I really believe you're right. I think he would. He was very innovative, very thoughtful, going to places where people hadn't been. His idea to buy up all that real estate in Central Florida was, people just thought of as swampland, right? He had big ideas. He was a good dreamer. He was a good visionary. And that's what we need to see happen again. We need to see the leadership get out of that notion. I don't know if you're familiar, but being in the world that I'm in with a lot of innovators doing a lot of work out here on the West Coast, everybody knows that you don't want to work for Disney. They pay terrible, horrible. They're one of the lowest paying companies in the whole industry. Entertainers that come to Vegas, if they've worked for Disney, they're sort of like, yeah, you only do that when you have to, like when you need the job. People that work in theme parks chronically talk about what a horrible job it is, and have no fun acting like they're Alice in Wonderland or whoever, Dorothy from the Wizard of Oz. So when you look at it, you see, what have you done? Well, you've got this, you keep driving your costs down to try to keep the business successful. Right? If the business was really successful and people were loving it and you were making lots of money, you'd pay people more. You'd be a great place to work instead of a terrible place to work. I know a lot of suppliers only supply Disney with things for just a short period of time and they walk away because there's just no margin in being a supplier to the company. Those are all signs that your business is in trouble. Signs that you need the past is catching up with you and you need to start to get out there and get after the future. And so I think a lot of the people that we're talking to, you can get locked in that. Grandpa gave me 50 gas stations, so I'm in a gas station business. Okay, well, if we're going to have electric cars in a decade, what, you still think you're going to make it in a gas business? Yeah. You got to start to think about the fact that Grandpa did that because when Grandpa did that or when Dad did that, whenever the business was started, that was a growing business. Yeah. You got into something that was doing well. It was growing. It was an emerging trend, and it worked really well. But trends evolve. Trends change. And now it's the responsibility of all leaders to identify the trends and move to where the trends are, often meaning you have to move away or get out of those albatross-like resources, those albatross-like assets that you've been hanging on to that just aren't going to do you any good going forward.
Yeah, I've talked about this in the past, and when we've discussed it, that identification of that problem is key, but it also takes a lot of courage. And you made a mention to universities. There was we're in Tucson, University of Arizona Wildcats. I'm wearing the polo today. Up the road 90 miles is another university, Arizona State University, which incidentally, it's kind of funny. There's a rivalry between Tucson and Phoenix, but the only people that really care are people in Tucson. That might be a little bit unpopular with some of our crowd, but that's true. You ask people in Phoenix, they don't really even think about Tucson as a competitor, but whatever. Point being is a number of years ago, the Dr. Crow, who's the president of Arizona State University, made some decisions that were extremely unpopular. He was going to move a lot of the students to online. And everybody's like, what are you talking about? This isn't the way to go, and so forth and so on. Well, two things happened. Number one, he was right. And a lot of these students are going to online learning. They are now the largest university by membership in the US. They have about 100,000 students. But what it also did is the brick and mortar component, the research, now because they have all these students paying for an education without the space, right. They're empowering the research side with more money and more resources. So 7-8 years ago it was unpopular. Now they're like among the most popular online schools. Right. And again, it comes back to that romance and that courage.
Yeah, well, we're in this pandemic. And the thing is, there's so many people who have this feeling inside of themselves that somehow in 3 or 6 months, they're going to wake up and it's going to be December of 2019 again. And we're going to behave the way we behaved in December of 2019. And that's just not true. It's just not going to happen. So you sit here with a situation like movie theaters and you start saying, are people really going to go back to movie theaters in 6 months now that they've done all this entertainment at home? There'll be a surge. There'll be a little bit, I want to get out of the house. There'll be a surge. Are people going to say, why did we go to those theme parks again? Because now I can realize other things that I can do, things I can have fun with. So the fact is that what this pandemic has shown is the classic, innovation gap, and it's literally what we call it, the innovation gap, that's developing at Disney, and it's developing in a lot of organizations. We're saying that innovation gap's been developing for a long time, but now you get a big disruption, you get a punctuated equilibrium like we've talked about in the last 2 episodes, and that brings to the fore the requirements, like, well, let's change. And the people who were slow to change now start to change. The people who had started changing accelerate their change, and they all move forward. And so now what happens is people that 6 months ago only had a small understanding of the difference between Hulu and Netflix have a very good understanding of the two right now. People that had never pulled down Orange is the New Black have pulled all the episodes down and gone through them, realized what it means to sit there and watch television all day long, watch out of what binging means, because now they've finally done it. And so I see how that works now. I see how it's fun. People who used to be addicted to having sports on all day long have found alternative things to watch in terms of entertainment because the sports went away. So that's changed as well. So those things are not going to go back. And what we need to do is say in this pandemic, as we see this stuff happening, recognize it and say, well, where am I going to go? When am I going to get to the next spot? In the case of, will people pay this week? They're saying, okay, go watch Mulan on Disney Plus, download it and pay $30. And the question is, will people pay the $30? At best, that's a stopgap effort. At best, it's you made an investment in an old business model. You're trying to recover your investment from the old business model. Surely you won't make that mistake again. Surely you'll go to a new business model. You'll figure out a better way to approach content development, distribution. And then I think you're going to have to rethink the whole concept of how we interact, what entertainment is meant to be. When I was young, people plopped their butt in front of a television and watched commercials. You watched what they fed you. You had no choice, right? You had 3 networks, that was it.
Different world.
Different world today. There are too many options.
Much different world. And in a matter of speaking, it's a small world after all, isn't it?
And like I said, it's interactive. If you take a look, for example, at sports, I wrote a column 5 years ago about Major League Baseball, the NFL, and the NBA. All of them were losing fans. The average age of the diehard fan that watched a lot of sports is actually now 55 years old. So what's happening is the people are aging, especially baseball is really the one that's really in serious trouble. You just don't have the people watching. Now, do people go to ball games? Yes, but they don't go to ball games to watch a ball game. You can do that at home, right? You can sit at home and watch it on a big screen, or you could go to the pub and watch it on a big screen, have a great time. If you're going to the ball game, you're going because you want to spend $400 and have an event. You want to have the experience, right? And so now they're realizing, hey, there's other ways I can have experiences. And they're thinking about, do I need to go spend $400 to go watch the Celtics play or to go watch the Diamondbacks play or whatever it is? So they're rethinking all of that. So that's changing the face of sports. And then you start realizing, okay, as those older people are having to think about new ways, their ideas, the younger people are coming along behind them with these more interactive sports, the gaming, all that kind of thing. And we're seeing in front of our eyes the old approach to sports, the old approach is dying off. At the same time, the new approach is now blossoming, it's growing, it's online. I mean, all of the gaming companies are doing great. Not the PC gaming. They can't make Nintendo machines fast enough now. You can't get the software releases out. People are spending, literally billions of dollars to get the little extras that go in these games. It's just flourishing beyond anything anybody had ever seen before.
Yep.
If people think that's going to slow down, no way. No way. It's just going to keep accelerating. And that's the Disney problem. That's the entertainment. That's where it's all headed. And I think what we want our listeners to get out of the story about Disney today is, here's a company that we idolize. Here's a company that most of us probably thought never did anything wrong, built this huge brand in terms of the Disney Corporation, had all these great assets, in terms of movies and the characters and the amusement parks. We thought all that was great. What I want people to see is, in the rear view mirror, it's great. Looking back there, that was great, but it was great. And what we have this, as you said, romantic notion. We get tied to it, and then we lack the courage to get our eyes focused on the windshield and see where we're headed again. Absolutely. And that's what we want to make sure that all of our listeners are sitting there saying, okay, I'm in this pandemic. I'm faced with challenges. I probably was faced with challenges before the pandemic. So where do I want to be in a year? Where are my customers going to be in a year? I need to get my business out there. I need to start thinking about what I'm going to do to make my business successful out there in a year when the new world order is coming to fruition, whether that's a new world order where we all wear masks, a new world order where we interact differently. What we do know for a fact is that it's definitely going to be a new world order in which everybody's going to be more mobile. Everybody's going to be asynchronous and not going to be willing to tie together at specific times. People are going to use gig resources, and an ever-growing, it's going to grow exponentially, and they're looking for you to deliver to them a product that's got some intelligence built into it. And if you start going down and using those 4 major trend themes, it's really going to help you think about what your next business is going to be like.
Great. Well, thanks for the time here, Adam. We discussed some very powerful topics, and I'm excited to talk next week. We're going to have an interview with somebody who knows a lot about the entertainment industry, a gentleman named Phil Abram, who was the president of Sonos, as well as the chief infotainment officer for General Motors. We're going to have a good talk and looking forward to next time.
Thank you very much, Manny.
Okay, Adam, take care of yourself.
Take care.
See ya.